Take a slow breath. Just stop for a brief moment before you continue scrolling. If you found yourself here today, it wasn't by accident. It wasn't simply a coincidence or some random moment in your feed. Something deep within you was searching for these words, and somehow they found their way to you. So stay with me for a little longer. I want you to think about that special person right now. Allow their face to appear clearly in your mind. Then notice what begins to happen inside you. That soft pull in your heart. That mixture of warmth, longing, and something that is difficult to explain. That feeling is not confusion. It is your heart recognizing something that your mind is still trying to fully understand. This person is not someone who entered your life by pure chance. On a deeper level, something within you has known them for much longer than you realize. I also understand how exhausting it can be to carry a love this deep while everything around it feels uncertain. All those nights you stayed awake holding these emotions quietly inside yourself, wondering if you were reading too much into every sign, wondering whether any of it truly mattered. It does matter, more than you think. You are not being foolish. You are not being overly emotional. You are not imagining things. You are simply standing in the middle of an experience that will eventually become deeply meaningful, and that is exactly why it feels so difficult right now. If you feel deeply connected to someone, even when the journey has been painful, take a moment to leave a like so this message can reach others who may need to hear it. What makes these connections so powerful is that they never stay on the surface. They reach directly into the hidden places within us that we spent years trying to manage, protect, or simply survive through. Many people believe love should arrive like relief, like finally reaching calm waters after struggling against endless waves. But the connections that truly transform us often arrive more like a storm before they ever become peaceful. They shake loose everything buried beneath years of emotional survival. Old coping patterns, protective walls, pride, fear, and habits that once kept us safe all begin to rise to the surface. At first, this process can feel less like growth and more like everything is falling apart. When someone enters your life and reaches places no one else has ever touched, your old defenses suddenly stop working. The person who always gives too much eventually realizes just how exhausted they have become from constantly trying to prove their worth while placing everyone else's needs before their own. They slowly begin asking themselves why they believed love had to be earned through endless patience, sacrifice, and emotional effort. That realization can be incredibly painful because it forces them to face the belief they carried for years that love was never something they deserved simply because they existed. At exactly the same time, the other person is facing a very different but equally frightening truth. They learned to survive by remaining emotionally distant. For them, closeness became connected to memories of pain, disappointment, betrayal, or loss. Their nervous system gradually learned to treat genuine intimacy as something dangerous. They pull away not because the connection lacks meaning, but because the emotions become too powerful for them to control comfortably. From the outside, it appears as though one person keeps chasing while the other continues creating distance, leaving the relationship feeling painfully unbalanced. Yet, beneath everything visible, two wounded hearts are simply responding to the very same fear in completely different ways. The fear of rejection, abandonment, or believing they are somehow not enough. The one who pursues believes love will disappear unless they continue fighting for it, making every moment of silence feel unbearable. Yet eventually they must discover that abandoning themselves is simply too high a price to pay for any relationship. Their value has never been determined by how much pain they are willing to endure for someone else. If you believe this connection is meant to become something meaningful, even though everything feels completely stuck right now, leave the word destined in the comments. The one who withdraws usually carries the opposite wound. Deep inside, they often believe that if someone gets too close, they will eventually lose themselves, disappoint the person they care about, or become emotionally trapped. Because of that fear, they instinctively create distance the moment everything begins to feel real. Yet that distance rarely gives them the peace they hoped for. Instead, it often leaves them carrying guilt, uncertainty, loneliness, and an even stronger awareness of just how deeply they truly care. Avoiding vulnerability may protect them from possible rejection for a while, but it also prevents them from fully receiving the love they secretly long to experience. Healing almost never looks graceful in the beginning. Sometimes it looks like uncertainty. Sometimes it appears as inconsistency, emotional overwhelm, fear, or long stretches of silence while someone struggles to understand themselves more honestly. Real growth often appears messy long before it begins to look wise. A caterpillar literally dissolves inside its cocoon before becoming something entirely different. Transformation has always required something to end first. Not physical life itself, but the ending of outdated identities, protective defenses, and limiting beliefs that simply cannot survive inside a deeper experience of love. That is why these connections can feel almost impossible to carry at times. They reveal every contradiction living inside us. They show us just how deeply we long for closeness while exposing just how frightened we are of receiving it. They gently force us to recognize the difference between attachment and authentic love. Attachment quietly says, "Please don't leave because I need you to fill the emptiness I still carry inside." True love eventually learns to say, "I want to meet you completely while also learning how to remain whole within myself." And once that shift begins to happen, everything starts to change. But here is the part I truly need you to hear with complete clarity. This is the part that so many people overlook. In every one of these connections, there comes a defining turning point. And it does not arrive through some dramatic event or a long-awaited conversation. It does not happen because they finally speak the words you have been hoping to hear. It happens because of a quiet decision you make deep within yourself. The decision to stop waiting to be chosen and begin sincerely choosing yourself instead. And when that inner shift takes place, something throughout the entire dynamic begins to transform. Not because love works like magic, but because the energy you bring into the space between two people always has an impact. When you stop reaching towards someone from a place of fear, insecurity, or emotional need, you stop becoming someone they instinctively feel the need to move away from. Type yes if you're ready to hear what truly needs to happen before you can be together. Then, perhaps for the very first time, they are left alone with what they genuinely feel about you. Not what they fear. Not what they have spent so long avoiding, but what has always been there beneath the surface, and what is there has never truly disappeared. I want you to believe that with your whole heart. Let me be completely honest with you about something, and I need you to stay with these words instead of rushing past them. Everything you have experienced throughout this period of waiting, every single part of it has carried meaning. Not one moment has been wasted. I know it can feel that way sometimes. I know there are moments when you look back at all the love you have given and wonder if it simply dissolved into empty space, if it reached anyone at all, if any of it was truly worth it. But here is what I know to be true. Love does not simply disappear. It does not vanish without leaving something behind. Every quiet evening spent thinking about someone who is not beside you, every night you drift to sleep carrying feelings that seem to have nowhere to go, none of it is meaningless. That love is alive. It continues to shape you, strengthen you, and deepen you into someone capable of holding something truly extraordinary when the right moment finally arrives. When you cry because something that feels so right also brings so much pain, it is never proof of weakness or fragility. Those tears are evidence that your heart refuses to abandon something it recognizes as deeply meaningful. They represent a rare kind of loyalty that few people are willing to carry. Most people eventually find a reason to walk away when life becomes this uncertain and emotionally demanding. They protect themselves before they can be hurt any more than they already have. It would have been so easy for you to shut down, build walls around your heart, and decide that loving this deeply was simply too dangerous. So many people experience enough disappointment or spend enough time waiting that they eventually become silent and emotionally closed because the cost feels too high. You had every reason to make that same decision, and honestly, no one would have blamed you if you had. Yet you remained open when closing yourself off would have been easier. You stayed gentle when becoming hard felt like the simplest option. In a world that often rewards emotional distance and guarded hearts, your decision not to become that person is not a weakness. It is a remarkable kind of strength. To love wholeheartedly without constantly calculating what you will receive in return is an incredibly rare foundation upon which lasting love is built. You chose to remain present. You chose to keep feeling. You chose to continue caring even when everything around you seemed to give you permission to walk away. And that matters more than you probably realize. To love someone through confusion, through separation, through seasons where nothing feels certain, and silence stretches farther than you ever imagined, and to do it without allowing that experience to make you bitter requires something that cannot be imitated and cannot be taught from the outside. Either that capacity lives inside you or it does not. And it clearly lives within you. That is not some small quality you possess. It may actually be one of the most important things about who you are. It is precisely that part of you that is guiding you toward something genuine, not toward a relationship that keeps you emotionally unsteady, forever trying to interpret hidden meanings, forever wondering where you truly stand, forever preparing yourself for another moment of uncertainty. It is not leading you toward a love that constantly makes you feel as though your emotions are somehow too much for the relationship you have been given. Instead, you are moving towards something that truly fits. Something that does not ask you to shrink yourself, silence your heart, or dim any part of who you really are. A love that feels the way taking a deep breath feels after carrying tension in your chest for far too long. That is not simply a poetic image. It is honestly where all of this is leading if you continue doing what I am about to share with you. So, what does that actually look like in everyday life? What do you do today, tomorrow, and in all the days that follow? Here is the most important and perhaps the most difficult step, and I am not going to make it sound easier than it really is. You intentionally turn your attention back toward yourself. You do it consciously, deliberately, and with sincere purpose. Not as a performance designed to look like you have moved on. Not as a strategy to punish them, send a message, or make them react. Not as part of some long, emotional game. Genuinely and honestly, you redirect the energy you have been pouring outward, and you bring that energy back home to yourself. You begin asking yourself a question that perhaps you have not asked in a very long time. Share this video with someone who feels trapped inside a confusing yet deeply meaningful connection. Ask yourself a question that may even feel unfamiliar when you say it out loud. What do I truly need right now? Not what do they need. Not what could I possibly do, say, or become that might finally change the situation between us. Not what would convince them to return, open their heart, or finally understand everything I have been trying to express. Instead, gently ask yourself what your own heart has been asking for all along. What kind of peace do you need? What kind of healing have you been postponing? What kind of life have you been placing on hold while waiting for someone else's decision? Those are the questions that quietly begin changing everything. The moment you answer them honestly is the moment your entire path begins to shift in ways you may not immediately notice, but will one day look back on with complete understanding. What do you need? What would truly bring you peace today? Which part of your own life have you been overlooking because your attention has been fixed on something that always seemed just beyond your reach? You begin tending to those places again. You begin saying yes to yourself with even a small portion of the warmth and enthusiasm you have been giving so freely to everyone else. The dreams you postponed because you believed life needed to feel more certain first, you slowly begin making space for them. You stop waiting for the perfect moment and start embracing some of those things now. The friendships that quietly faded into the background because so much of your emotional energy was invested somewhere else, you gently reconnect with some of those people. The parts of yourself that you placed aside because this situation consumed so much of your attention, you bring them back into your life. You brush away the dust and remember that they have always belonged to you. None of this means pretending the love is gone. None of it asks you to force yourself to stop caring or to manufacture feelings that are not real. It is simply about allowing your life to expand back into its natural shape so you are no longer living inside a tiny space built around one person and one possible outcome. And this is what begins to happen when you honestly live that way. Something inside you changes. It is not a dramatic transformation that appears overnight. It is far quieter than that. Yet it is unmistakably real. You stop feeling like an unfinished sentence waiting for someone else to complete it. You stop feeling trapped in an endless waiting room, as though your life cannot truly begin until this one situation finally resolves itself. Instead, you begin to feel like a complete person, someone whose life carries meaning, color, depth, and momentum regardless of what any single relationship is or is not doing. And that feeling, that quiet stability, that deep sense of being rooted in your own existence instead of hanging within someone else's uncertainty, changes the way you move through the world. It transforms your presence. The people around you notice it, even if they cannot fully explain why. There is something unmistakable about a person who genuinely feels at home within themselves. It is magnetic in the deepest and most authentic sense of the word. It naturally draws people closer instead of constantly reaching after them. And the person you have been carrying in your heart throughout all of this, they will notice it too, perhaps more than anyone else. They will feel the difference, even if they cannot immediately put it into words. This is not a strategy. I want to be completely clear about that because the last thing I would ever want is for you to hear these words as some clever technique for producing a certain outcome. That is not what this is. It is simply the natural result of someone no longer relating to another person from a place of emptiness and beginning instead from a place of genuine inner abundance. Everything between two people starts to breathe differently. There is finally enough space for something real to unfold, something that simply could not exist before. Now I want to speak about them for a moment because I believe there is something important you deserve permission to understand. They are not the villain in this story. I know there have probably been moments when the pain made it tempting to see them that way. Times when the silence, the distance, or the inconsistency encouraged you to create a simpler story where one person was clearly right and the other clearly wrong. But life is rarely that simple. They are not a cold-hearted person. They are not someone who simply does not care about you. What you have interpreted as distance is often something far more complex than simple indifference. It is someone who, somewhere along the path of their own life, usually long before you ever entered it, learned to experience love as something dangerous, something costly, something capable of opening wounds so deep that avoiding closeness felt safer than risking them again. They did not consciously choose that belief. Almost no one does. Those fears become woven into a person through experiences that shape them long before they are old enough to understand or even name what they are living through. So what appears to you as withdrawal is often someone trying to manage a fear that has quietly lived inside them for many years. Comment healing if this message is touching something deep within your heart right now. They think about you during the quiet spaces between distractions, in those moments when everything becomes still enough that they can no longer outrun what is really happening inside them. You are there. They notice the absence of your energy even during the moments when they were the ones who created that distance in the first place. There is a tension inside them connected to you that does not disappear simply because the two of you are no longer speaking. What they feel has never truly been about physical closeness. It reaches much deeper than that. It touches something inside them they have not yet finished understanding or healing. And that unfinished work is not yours to carry. You cannot walk that path for them. No matter how deeply you care, no matter how clearly you recognize what they are struggling with, no matter how much love you are willing to offer as a bridge through their fear, that journey ultimately belongs to them. What you can do, and perhaps the most powerful choice available to you, is refuse to let their fear become the author of your story. Refuse to absorb their unresolved pain as proof that something is missing inside you. Choose instead to hold yourself with genuine dignity, quiet compassion, and unwavering self-respect. Love yourself with enough consistency that when they eventually move beyond the fears that have kept them stuck, the person they encounter is someone who has continued growing all along. Not someone diminished by endless waiting, not someone emptied by longing, not someone desperately searching for the validation they should have been offering themselves from the very beginning. But someone standing completely in their own light, someone grounded, someone whole, someone emotionally steady, someone who has continued building a meaningful life regardless of uncertainty, someone whose peace is no longer dependent upon another person's timing, choices, or emotional readiness. Because the deepest kind of love does not ask you to disappear while waiting for someone else to find themselves. It quietly invites you to become even more fully yourself. And in doing so, whether the future brings reunion or a completely different chapter, you are no longer meeting life from a place of fear. You are meeting it with openness, confidence, quiet strength, and the unmistakable presence of someone who finally understands that their worth has never depended on another person's ability to recognize it. Close your eyes for just a moment and picture a morning that is much closer than you may realize. You wake up, and the very first thing you notice is that the weight has disappeared. That familiar heaviness that has rested in your chest, the one that has been there for so long you almost forgot what life felt like without it. Now it is no longer there. Not because your emotions have faded, not because you stopped loving this person, and not because you forced yourself into becoming detached. It is gone because your love has finally found a place where it belongs. Because what remained unfinished has finally been completed. Because the outcome that always seemed destined to unfold has unfolded at last. It is no longer sitting somewhere in the future, waiting for the right moment to become real. It has already become your reality. Imagine turning toward this person and truly looking into their face. You notice something that either has never been there before or something you have not seen for a very long time. You do not see hesitation. You do not see uncertainty hidden behind their eyes. You do not see that quiet feeling of someone who is physically present while emotionally holding something back. Instead, you see peace. A calm, settled kind of peace that belongs to someone who has made a complete decision and no longer questions it. Someone who is not constantly evaluating it, protecting themselves, or keeping part of their heart in reserve. Someone who is simply there with you, completely and wholeheartedly. Imagine what it feels like to experience a love that no longer visits your mind at 2 in the morning as a source of fear or anxiety. A love where you are not lying awake, replaying every conversation, searching endlessly for something you overlooked, wondering what you should have said differently, or worrying about what might happen next. A love where your nervous system is finally allowed to relax. Where you are no longer scanning every interaction for hidden signals, preparing yourself for disappointment, or bracing against an uncertainty that never fully disappears. Picture a love where the question of whether you are enough no longer exists. Not because you finally convinced someone to recognize your worth, but because you are with someone who never questioned your value in the first place. Someone who truly sees you, every complicated and layered part of who you are, the qualities you celebrate and the pieces of yourself that are still growing, every strength, every weakness, every lesson, every dream, and they choose you completely. Not despite those parts, but together with them, appreciating the entire person standing before them. This is not simply a comforting story created to ease your heart. It is the natural destination of two people who both decided to take their own healing seriously. Two people who stopped approaching each other while carrying unresolved pain, old disappointments, and fears from the past, expecting someone else to repair what life had damaged within them. Instead, they came together as individuals who had already done enough inner work to become genuinely available for something authentic, something lasting, and something real. That is exactly what is quietly being built right now through the uncertainty, the waiting, the unanswered questions, and the difficult moments of this season in your life. Every challenge has a purpose that may not be obvious today. Every quiet moment is shaping you into someone capable of receiving the kind of love you have always hoped for. If you have been patiently waiting while continuing to work on yourself for this exact kind of relationship, let that be something you are proud of.